Glenn, welcome to today's program. I think we are going to talk about the moon today and the conditions there, and maybe also a little bit about the Apollo program, what really happened, what people claim did happen, and what really happened, because they did go to the moon. And I think I would just like you to introduce the moon as a body of which is encircling the Earth, and quite an interesting place. So I'll give the word to you, Glenn, and whatever you want to talk about.
All right, Renee. Well, good day to you and
Yep.
all the people that are going to take a good hard look at this program once we post it on YouTube. And we have been collecting data on the moon and involved in that subject already since the 1970s when we had a telescope and we had, of course, all the lunar pictures, telescopic pictures that George and Adamski bequeathed us through his 6 and 15-inch telescope, which we will also include in some of the pictures we see today. But the major emphasis of this program was that I wanted to inform people on some things, some facts that they may not have heard or are not aware of concerning the moon, and the fact that the conditions that are on the moon are similar to the Earth in many ways. And so this similarity extends not only beyond the Earth, beyond the moon, but on into the solar system, other planets, and beyond into the interstellar galactic region as well. This uniformity of evolution, of chemical, organic evolution, and life.
Yeah.
And so when we see that concurrence between the, what we have been told and what is actually truly there on the moon, and this is all verifiable. This is not any kind of uh, accusation or assumptions like we hear so often in the UFO field. Well, we didn't go to the moon, we faked it in the studio, or this or that or this. These are all just blatant suppositions that are thrown out there to stir up the entire field, the UFO field, the planetary field, and space to create a greater confusion in this particular subject.
Yeah.
So I think that by the end of the program, we will have covered that one, the moon has greater gravity than we are talking about, the Newtonian 1/6 formula. There is a light atmosphere, there is plenty of water, there's clouds and mists, there are uh, both terrestrial made vehicles and extraterrestrial vehicles. And so there's a plethora of information that we're going to cover. And hopefully, this will serve as a good open discussion and educational service for anybody who is truly interested in this particular subject.
Yeah, that's a good introduction, Glenn. And I think you would just continue, and I think we will. You will share the screen, so we will be
Yes.
presented with some visuals.
Yeah.
Yep, that's a good one.
Okay. So when I put together this program, I wanted to put together verifiable material, factual material, so that people have something that they can look at and educate themselves and rely on versus the hyperbole and supposition of what is flung around in today's subject about this. And secondly, because a lot of this information, or the majority of it, is all available. And so people will ask, well, I never knew this about the moon. I never knew that about the moon, because we're still teaching in our educational systems that the moon is a dead body and it's lifeless and all of these other things. And we have never updated that material. And I don't know why they don't want to update it, but you would think that somebody would want to educate our newer generations on the truth,
Yeah.
rather than than the old dogmas and old superstitions.
Yeah.
So essentially, what has come out is there were several books about the moon that came out originally on this subject in the late 70s. The first investigatory study that was done, it was done by George Leonard, I believe that he also was a NASA employee. And this book, I believe, came out in 1979. And this started the lunar anomaly investigation. And so we had already begun our own investigation during the 70s. And my father's book came out as well. This one came out in 1981, which had a collection of all the NASA photos that we had the opportunity to write to specific departments, get the catalogs, look at the photos, and then order them. You have to pay for them, and then you would get them back in either 12 by 12 or 11 by 15 format. And so,
was it mainly the Apollo photos, or was it also the lunar orbiter?
They were also lunar orbiter shots. I believe there was some Mariner as well.
Yeah.
So it was a combination of a lot of the lunar shots, the lunar orbiters 1 through 5.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Then the Apollo shots, and of course, as you got later and later into the system, the Apollo shots were Hasselblad shots, which Hasselblad cameras took high definition photos. So that was quite a unique format in those days.
Yeah.
And then my father was invited by Lord Clancarty to the British House of Lords in '83 to give an address and show the pictures and slides and things like that. And Lord Clancarty took the book to Prince Philip and Prince Charles and gave them a copy. And we received the replies, in which I show those letters in my new book, The UFO Reality, Can Truth Prevail? The next book that came out was in 1983, and this was Moongate. And this was a very, very intense study into what they call the NASA military cover up in '82, pardon me. And so these 3 books composed the staple of the investigation into the anonymous and luminous observations of the moon.
Yeah.
And so if you want to know and take a look, this is how the catalogs come, with individual pictures here like this. And in this case, you can see this. You can see the UFO above the astronaut, Apollo 12, and you can see here the atmosphere, the fuzz of the atmosphere on the lunar horizon, and on some of the other shots. But basically, this is how they come. And then you take these numbers and you write them back and say, we would like this picture and we would like to pay, and you paid for it. And we got dozens and dozens of pictures that way. And that's how we began our own investigative process that went into the alien bases. I'd say that one of the greatest hoaxes, one of the greatest despicable type of activity are those who are out there who are claiming that the space program was never real. I mean, this is pure. I can't even think of a word of how hideous it is, because anybody who's gone and looked at the thousands and tens of thousands of photographs know that these are pictures that are not faked in a studio.
Yeah.
You cannot fake something that you don't know what it looks like to begin with.
No.
Right? You have to be out there. This is a Gemini shot. Of course, for people who know the history of the space program, first there was Mercury, then Gemini, and then Apollo. And it went through the process of launching, orbiting, docking, then, you know, slingshotting to the moon without landing, and so many different things. And so you can see that photo, and you can see here astronaut Ed White, the second man, I believe, to walk in space. The Soviets were the first. And so, I mean, you can see the spacecraft, the Gemini.
Remember, you can zoom in, Glenn. You can zoom in on
Yes.
that one, I think.
Okay, yes, we shall.
Yeah, that's a little bit better. Yep.
And then you can see the curvature of the Earth, showing it as a sphere and not a flat top like a pizza.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean the sheer audacity of some of these people's accusations is not only an insult to the regular person's intelligence, but it's also such a cowardly accusation against the people who bravely risk their lives to go into space. I mean, strapping yourself to a rocket is nothing more than a controlled bomb. It just
Exactly.
releases the energy in a more variable rate versus an explosive all at once rate. And there were plenty of failures too. So it took a hell of a lot of courage in order to do that.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is the launch, of course, of the Saturn V off Cape Canaveral, which is now Cape Kennedy. And, you know, this was not only witnessed by live television by millions, but there were thousands of people there at the launch site and thousands of people surrounding that area there in Daytona Beach that could watch this device take off and hear the roar of those engines that trembled the ground, and then to continue to accelerate up into space and to stage separation. I mean, and these telescopes, not only visually but radarly, tracked the Apollo all the way to the moon.
Yeah.
So to claim that this device never went there is absolute nonsense. Nonsense. I mean, people really need to use some of their rational thinking when they start to hear some of the ridiculous assumptions that are being broadcast out there.
Yeah.
I just wanted to throw this in here so that people could kind of get a general idea on the front side of the moon. Now, remember, the front side of the moon is lit 14 days out of the month in various stages. The back side of the moon is lit the other 14 days out of the month for a total of 28 days on a lunar cycle.
Yeah.
So when people say the dark side of the moon, that is a misnomer. It is not the dark side. It is nothing more than the back side of the moon.
Yeah, actually, it is called, in astronomical terms, this side is called the near side, and the other side is called the far side.
The far side.
Yeah,
that's
that
correct.
is how you mention the two sides.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so that kind of gives people an idea, because a lot of people had no idea that both sides of the moon are lit.
No.
And so we give them that, and then as well as this photo, just to give once again a little bit more of a orientation. The Straight Wall, Tycho, Copernicus, Plato, these are all areas along with the Alpine Valley that are extremely active. If you take a telescope and watch these areas over a reasonable amount of time, you are likely to see activity of all kinds.
Yeah.
And so it is good to give the orientation there.
Yeah, these are points of interest for people interested in looking at the lunar surface.
Also, not only looking through a telescope, but if they are looking to acquire, photographs and things like that.
Photographic equipment. Yes.
Yeah, this is the Alpine Valley.
Yeah.
And the Alpine Valley has a lot of activity. We ourselves, with our 12.5-inch telescope, witnessed activity along this entire segment.
Yeah.
And so, and you can see some of the water runoff valleys, drainage valleys, which you'll see additional photographs of. And so that kind of gives you a good idea of how this looks. And here is another area that is very active, and that's called the Straight Wall. In reality, it's a ridge line, very much like a earthquake fault line, a tectonic line.
Yeah.
And the Straight Wall has a lot of activities too. In particular, when you look into some of these, when you get a clear Hasselblad picture of this and you look into the interior of the craters, we have found areas that look like it have construction. Some areas seem to have symbols like S or an H. There are a lot of areas on the moon that seem to have some symbolic engravings or constructions.
Yeah.
So, while we talk about crop circles here on Earth, I think that there are also not crop circles, obviously, but there are marcations and petroglyphs or geoglyphs, as we like to call, that are seeable on the moon as well.
Yeah.
In this photo, we are seeing the LEM, the lunar module, the lander module, surface of the moon, the Earthrise behind it. And you can go and you can watch the videos of these events themselves as the LEM leaves and goes down and touches down the radar callouts, when it comes back into orbit and redocks again with the orbiting module. When you see that, it is so transparent, the reality of things are. And it's just not a few, it's
Yeah.
thousands of frames, thousands of feet of film, thousands of photographs.
Yeah.
And so, how would you invent the moonscape with the Earthrise if you never saw it to begin with? You wouldn't know what to construct. So, and I think here another good one that gives people a good view. I mean, when you think about it, we really live on a beautiful planet, the planet Earth.
We do.
And we treat it so terribly. And we were even considering exploding a hydrogen bomb on the moon at one point. The people that are running these disastrous programs, and so we would destroy ourselves given half the chance. This particular photo. You wanted to add something, Renee?
No, that's fine. No.
Okay. This particular photo I thought was just a good example of giving people a little bit of a thinking of many things here. First of all, you've got the solar wind that travels through space and impacts our protective atmosphere around the Earth. And then you have the electromagnetic fields, and then the plasma, and then you have a current that goes behind it of material, organic material that flows off the Earth, just like kind of like a back of a comet. And also the material that as we travel through space, the organic material that composes life, we fly into, and tons of that material saturates the Earth for billions of years. Not only the Earth, but all the other planets as well. So we are intermixing the biological RNA and DNA and organic chemistry, not only for our planet and the moons, but all the other planets as well. And we will see an excellent review of this in the next couple of clips. This one here, as the Earth travels through space, look at how the impact of the space material is deflected away from the planet. This is our magnetic protective shield, so to speak. And this is the same process that the extraterrestrial visitors use their propulsion system by duplicating the electromagnetic field of a planet or merging with it. They can then travel through space without the worry of impacting space dust and meteorites and all the many little tiny molecules and bigger ones, because as you're traveling at hundreds of thousand miles per second, it doesn't take but a grain of sand the size. If you didn't have a protective shield around your craft, it would go right through you like a cannon.
Exactly.
So here's an article that I wanted to show the people that we talked about. It says organic synthesis is going on everywhere in the atmosphere of planets, on the surface of Pluto, and between the stars. This is by Dr. Krogshak at NASA Ames Research Center. The universe is full of organic chemistry. However life originated on Earth, this stuff has been raining down on us for time immemorial.
Yeah, there is a constant exchange of organic material everywhere in the universe.
That's right. And recently I saw an interview of a UFO personality, and the interviewer actually was quite smart and said, well, since we have a commonality of organic chemistry in space, then it would bear reason that processes that are happening here are happening elsewhere in the cosmos. And all that person could do is she could just deny. Oh, no, that's not so, and so on and so forth, because there is a concentrated push to promote and advertise the Halloween story creature feature coming from space. And when we look at the science of it, and Dr. Panampura, who wrote The Principles of Life, discusses this in space as well. He said, don't be surprised when you land on another planet and somebody walks up to shake your hand. So between people who are actually involved with the reality of this, it is quite a different thing than what is being promoted. Most people, I found this video fascinating because we thought for a long time that everything was pancake, but we are moving through space, and all of the rest of the planets and the sun is moving through space, as well as space is moving itself. So we're intersecting the trails of every planet in this solar system.
Yeah.
That means that we are not only giving and sharing organic material, but we are getting it ourselves, and it spreads throughout the entire solar system and cosmos.
Yeah.
And so the reality of these facts alone should give us cause to stop and think, my God, what is it that we're being told versus what is really so? I like this particular pictorial more as just as a visual to show people that this is also how the trail of organic material spreads out from the Earth as we move through space as well. This is kind of like a plume or rooster tail behind us. And so that coincides with the previous solar systemic motion pictorial we saw. Now we're going to move into what has been said about the moon. And in this particular circumstance, you can see that already in 1871, the observations of the moon by the Royal Astronomical Society of England showed confirmed sightings of moving 50-mile wide opaque objects. 50-mile wide, think about that.
Yeah.
Great white domes, long bridge-like structures in the Mare Crisium. And then the Russian scientists in 1958 saw a huge glowing oval-shaped form, and the sightings are unexplainable. So once again, there is truth available out there, but one has to do quite a bit of research and be vigilant. It's not for the lazy person who thinks that everything is just going to be, printed for them on the front page of everything so that they don't have to do any work. No. This document comes out from NASA, and you can see April 66. And this is a chronological listing of lunar events. The interesting thing about this is that when you start to look at the lunar events, and I will try to zoom in on some and then back up, but it shows whole regions of the crater being lit by strong violet light, and as if covered with fog, glowing lights in the crater, milky white luminescence, mist on the crater floor. Now, mind you, in order to have mist, you have to have atmosphere, you have to have water, and you have to have pressure in order to sustain these particular type of atmospheric configurations. As in clouds, the same thing. And so it shows you that we were already in the 1800s and early 1900s aware and categorizing these type of activities. So
you could then wonder why in the hell don't people think about it like when we see mist on Earth and clouds and so on, we know it's because of our atmosphere, right? And the gravity. So why not put that up on the moon and say, maybe we were wrong? Why keep that a secret? That makes no sense, does it?
Well, I think I remember that when there was an article that Dr. Jastrow wrote about Viking, who he was director of, finding finding microbial life on Mars already in the 70s. And he made a statement. He says, scientists do not like to be questioned, and they don't like to be proven wrong.
But that is science, isn't it?
But that is science. Science is supposed to be a progressive system upon which you are constantly adding to the information that you've accumulated and not stubbornly digging in your feet and saying, no. Right? And then so we will see here the universal components of the development of life. Okay, gravity. We will note that the moon's gravity is not 1/6, not based on the Newtonian formula at all. It is actually 60% of Earth, and we can prove it. There is, because of this increased gravity and the fact that there's magnetic field on the moon, then we can also say that there's an atmosphere. And they have admitted to a light atmosphere recently, and I'll show you where it's printed. But a light atmosphere means motion, and that motion has to do with pressure and the movement of the isobars of pressure along the lunar geography,
Yeah.
which creates a wind. And this type of wind, and combined with the solar wind that comes and moves through the solar system, moves across the surface of the planet. So you combine the two, then you can have motion of these atmospheric accumulations like mist and clouds and whatever. It also explains to you why the flag, when it was planted, started flapping. And the astronaut had to reach out and grab the corner of it to keep it from flapping, because it shows to you that the atmospheric pressure and wind is very prevalent. Of course, the people who do not want to spend any time actually doing real research and coming up with tangible answers, the first thing that flies out of this mouth is, look, 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 there's the proof that that this was all done in a studio and not in a vacuum. That's because the moon does not exist in a vacuum. You have to get your scientific facts straight before you start the rest of it.
Yeah.
We also find organic material, very much like Earth, parts of it, all of them that are containing chemical oxygen. And in fact, from the lunar materials brought back from Apollo, we planted seeds and found out that the vegetables grew to a healthier and more magnanimous extent than they did here on Earth, that the lunar soil was actually better in some places than we have here. We can easily prove water. This is becoming more and more acceptable to people. What they didn't know was that this water was already reported in 1971 with the Apollo 12 and 14. Their equipment registered water geysers shooting out of the surface of the moon for 7 to 14 hours, like Old Faithful over in Yellowstone.
Yeah.
And then, of course, conducing life-sustaining temperature, and we'll prove that too. So let us look here at gravity. So just to make
before you start that, Glenn, I've just got the latest results from the Chinese probe that came back with material from the far side, and
Yes.
they found a lot of carbon-related graphene in the soil, which is very specific for the far side.
Mm-hmm.
And people think that both sides of the moon are the same, but they are not.
Well, no. If you look geographically, there are differences from one continent to another.
Yeah.
Sometimes even from one neighborhood to another,
Yeah.
as far as the type of geographic, configuration.
Yeah.
You look here on the West Coast, we have, a chaparral environment with forests on the mountains, and if you go to the southwest out there, like Sedona and other places, you have beautiful red rock cliffs. And a
totally different environment.
Entirely different environment. So why should it be any different on the moon?
Exactly.
Imagine the environmental and geophysical differences on big planets like Jupiter and Saturn, were 100 times the size of Earth.
Yeah.
So
sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but let's talk about gravity, Glenn.
Yeah. Oh no, that's no interruption. I want you to add in, please, whenever you want to.
Yeah.
The calculations for the gravity, first of all, when you have atmospheric pressure, you can see here Earth's sea levels is 1,000 millibars. The Andes, in which the people are working and living at 16,000 feet, is 600 millibars. Now in the sea level areas of the moon, it's 400 millibars. But then if you go into a crater and you go down a mile or so, then the atmospheric compressibility pushes, and pushes. And so in the bottom of the crater, the atmosphere is more dense and warmer, not any different than if you go to the Dead Sea and you go below sea level, or you go to the Grand Canyon and it's well over a mile down as well.
Yeah.
And you'll notice that in the bottom of the Grand Canyon, at certain times of the year, it can get very stuffy and very hot. And so you see that atmospheric compression in use right here on this planet.
Yeah, I've
Now,
been
when
to
we
Grand Canyon sometimes, quite a few times, and I know down in the bottom it's extremely hot, and when you come up through the to the rim, it is nice and cool. So that is how it
absolutely,
works. Yeah,
it's these are standards that
yeah,
are no matter what happens, these are geophysical standards,
yeah,
and
exactly.
so we are showing that the moon's gravity is actually a little over 60% of the Earth and not 1/6. And so, how are we going to mathematically prove that? Well, that is not a problem. First of all, when you look at the distance between the Earth and the moon, if you use the Newtonian 1/6 formula, the neutral gravity point, the L1 as it's called,
Yeah,
would be at about 24,000 miles from the lunar surface. But in reality, the actual L1 is at almost 44,000 miles from the lunar surface.
yes,
And since gravity expands exponentially, this is not just a mere doubling, it is a power upon a power itself. So x to the power of, so to speak. So when you look at this, and here are the references, not only Wernher von Braun in his book, Time Magazine, Apollo 11, these are all confirmed that that's where the L1 is. There is no denying it.
no,
Now, when you take that and then you go and you use the formula that they used for 1/6 and then use instead the actual neutral gravity point, you will see that the math is quite clear. Everybody could do it for themselves on their own calculators, and it will come up with 0.64 or 64% that of Earth. Well, now we start to think, well, we got a stronger atmosphere, a stronger gravity. Therefore, this now can sustain the other geological and geographical features like water and mist and clouds. This all adds to the equation. And so that's the first one in the slot. Here's a nice little proof picture of astronaut Young doing his famous jump on the moon. He was at, I believe it was 20 centimeters, which is slightly less than 2 feet. And they show when you see the film that he jumped as hard as he could. Had it been 1/6 gravity, he would have jumped well clear and higher than the flag itself,
yeah,
easily,
yeah,
if not meters higher.
yeah,
So this shows you that this man, this astronaut who's probably about 180 pounds, along with a 170-pound back, so he weighs about 300, let's just say 350 pounds. So under 1/6 gravity, it would weigh about 60 pounds. And so at 60 pounds, he should be jumping like a kangaroo. And then instead, he can only go less than 2 feet high.
yeah. When you see that
And
on video, you can see that he really makes an effort to jump as high as he can.
you can see as he
Yeah,
crouches and then jumps, he jumps as hard as he can.
yeah, and he does it
And
several times.
that's right, exactly. And so, once again, the people who are claiming all this is in the studio because they know that under 1/6 condition, this couldn't be possible. But the fact that the moon is 64% of Earth's gravity and is it's knowable, then that starts to change the equation. And
Yeah,
as we
it
talked,
makes sense that he couldn't jump higher than that.
right. And as we talked earlier, I think to some extent, some of the countries who have in the last 10 years sent probes to the moon were not given that information. And so they ended up crashing. There were several, I believe India, China, or it was Japan, whatever. They
Yeah,
crashed a couple of their vehicles into the moon. And I think they because they weren't aware that the neutral gravity point was further out. So that means you need to carry more fuel to
yeah,
fight the deceleration that needs to be done as you're nearing the lunar
yeah,
orbital phase.
yeah.
And so they
They should have
basically,
begun the braking procedure
yes.
much earlier. Yeah,
And so basically they ran out of gas and they
yeah,
could not,
exactly.
they couldn't retrofire in order to decelerate the craft from hitting the surface at an excessive speed.
Yeah,
And that makes perfect sense.
it does.
Um,
Oh,
another
Alan Shepard, sorry.
Alan Shepard, that's
Yeah,
it. The talk about hitting the golf ball and the fact that that the first claim they traveled miles and miles. who, first of all, is going to be able to see a golf ball miles and miles away.
No.
And as it turns out, that one ball went 24 yards and the other one 40. And that's as far as he could hit the ball. And that's telling you once again that the gravity on the moon was higher than what was proposed.
Yeah.
And in fact, this article is the second page to that. And there you go, in writing. And it shows where the balls went into the TV camera. And it shows also the LEM lunar module sitting here on the surface on the moon. And not only this picture, but the LRO, the Lunar Rovering Orbiter pictures that happened, I believe, around 2009, was it, or 6?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe, yeah. They flew over the landing site, and we have those pictures too.
Yeah, and that is actually a picture from the the LRO mission. It is.
That's right. And so consequently, it shows that the equipment that we left on the moon, if we didn't go, then how the world did we leave equipment there?
Exactly.
And so once again, the truth and the facts show you what is the real situation.
Yeah, and remember that we also saw the lunar module, ascend from the surface with the flag waving and so on when the engine fired, right? So we have several evidence of them being there.
Yeah, another thing is you have that I forgot to include in it was the lunar rover. As you see film clips of the lunar rover moving around the surface, you can see the rooster tail of the particles floating off the back of the tires and settling on the ground.
Yeah,
well, if there was no gravity, those particles would never be drawn back to the surface. They would just float around and float away.
Go up. Yeah.
Right. And so that changes things too. Well, the big kicker here is, of course, water. And we find out that there's plenty of water on the moon, just like there's plenty of water on Mars. So these are once again, open for anybody to go and look up and see. And I wanted to give the people a look at this, and I have a close look of this too. But this was already in 1971, and that was the water clouds and water geysers from Apollo 12 and 14. And we actually talked to John Freeman at NASA Goddard. There was a panel of scientists that my mother and father went to in 1967, I believe it was. And they had a conference with 22 scientists concerning the UFO situation, and the amount of information these people know would blow most people away. But it isn't the helter-skelter abduction creature feature stuff. Yeah. They know better. They know better than that, and they openly say so.
They do.
See, so here's the moon water detected. This is just a blow up of that particular article. But that shows that already in 71 we knew this, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't openly admitted again until the late 90s.
So but remember that 71, that was actually during the Apollo program.
Yes, so, it was 69 to 74,
72,
I believe.
72, yeah, that was the end.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, that was during the Apollo program.
Yeah.
I included this because I wanted to show that the moon's materials include stuff like materials like Earth.
Yeah.
Right, and the facts that. And then the other one was that there were moon volcanoes and moon quakes, which means that it is a geological, for lack of a better word, geologically alive.
Yeah, it's active.
You know, this idea that it's just a dead mass, that is complete falsehood.
Yeah.
All right, so here we go. This revelation, NASA finds significant water on the moon. That was on CNN. And this comes, let's see if I've got a date on it. It may be in the file, but of course it's during the time of CNN. So that's Ted Turner's network. So that had to be in the late 90s, somewhere in that time. So then they started to talk about the water on the moon. Then there was a denial phase where we said, well, no, we're not going to admit that. But then other countries started to go to the moon, and they were talking about, so we had to start talking about it again too,
Yeah.
because we didn't want to look like fools. All right, and this I wanted to show people that there's enough oxygen to sustain a lot of people for a long time. It is not just floating around oxygen, but it is chemical oxygen released from the minerals on the lunar surface.
Yeah, it's bound to the surface.
That's bound to the surface,
Yeah.
exactly. But remember, ladies and gentlemen, that on the Earth, 78% of this atmosphere is nitrogen,
Yeah.
not oxygen,
No.
nitrogen. And only 28% is oxygen, right? And 1% is byproducts, argon and helium and other things.
Yeah.
So in reality, everybody thinks, oh, well, we have to have this oxygen-rich and saturated environment.
No,
And
we need nitrogen, I can tell you.
Not at all. Nitrogen is the kicker here.
Oh, yeah.
And so, people need to rethink that equation as well.
Yeah.
This article, Plants Thrive in Moon Dust, and it shows that they grow healthier and are said to be generally huskier and slightly greener than sister planets being grown under ordinary conditions here on the Earth.
Interesting.
And so now let's start putting it together. Gravity, atmosphere, water. What else we need? A decent temperature, and we've got all the components of life to grasp and to prosper. Not too long ago, I love this article. This talks about Goldilocks zones on the moon. Over 200 of them. More importantly, it says, while the moon does have wild temperature fluctuations on the surface, it says here that there are areas in the craters that maintain a solid 63 Fahrenheit, always.
Yeah.
And then it goes on to say, it's very much like a day in San Francisco. So in these craters, you have a sustained temperature of 63 degrees Fahrenheit. You have compressibility of atmosphere, compressibility of the materials that is needed for life. And you don't think there is any life? Of course there's life. And everybody expects pictures of the moon to be this slate gray, that we're constantly shown that there's no color.
Yeah.
Well, take a look here. Here's a lunar shot. When you start looking at the films of the moon, you see that it's not slate gray. They're green areas, sometimes husky green. The astronauts said they flew over areas that looked like a clear mountain lake. These areas that change color, so perhaps they're lichen, perhaps there are, brush or some type of vegetation or whatever, but this is not the only area of it. So we need to get away from this constant standard of gray and black, which we're constantly shown.
Yeah, there are definitely colors of blue and brown as well.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah.
The next thing we want to talk about is the star field. There was a question asked, how come we don't see, when we see the lunar shots, we don't see any stars or very little stars? And that is because of what we call atmospheric wash, right? And so atmospheric wash means that the whiteout from being close to the lit area on the moon reflects itself back up, and the stars, some of them get blurred out. Not any different than here. During the day, if you look up in the sky, the intensity of the sun and of the own light refraction of the planet Earth, you don't see any of the stars either. But are there stars to be seen? Oh, yes, they are.
Yeah.
Once you move a little distance away from the moon, then you get to see that you're not under the influence of so much washout and whiteout, and plus you only have a crescent moon versus the light of an entire full moon, and then the stars become much more visible. So there's no big mystery, and there's no big conspiracy about that either. It's just a matter of researching down to the point where you can see the information.
Yeah.
And let's see, I suddenly lost the ability to increase the size of this one.
You
That's
should be
not,
able to use the mouse wheel to zoom in anyway, if you can.
no.
Well, maybe it's a small,
Anyway,
maybe it's a
this
small
is
image.
just,
Okay.
you can see this one image where you can see the moon and
Yeah.
you can see the side haze of the atmosphere, but it's not as light. The demarcation zone is here, and you can see the stars above the lunar horizon too.
Yeah.
So, you know, that should put that mystery to bed as well. And do we know about it? Of course we do. We even have articles that talk about why there's no stars on some of the pictures and what washout means and how the cameras are situated so that to take pictures of the of that area, as you can see the star field here. And
yeah, the Hasselblads of the Apollo series was set up to capture the surface of the moon, not the background sky. Actually,
that's right. It
Yeah.
said the smaller of the aperture, the faster the shutter speed,
Yeah,
the type
yeah.
of film,
Yeah.
and so on and so forth.
Exactly.
And so that tells you why not every picture is showing a star field, even though that star field is is very much there. As soon as you pop out of the atmosphere of this planet, the star field is fantastic.
I do, however, find it interesting that on the press conference for Apollo 11, all three astronauts were asked if they noticed any stars, and they said, "We can't remember." That is a weird statement. That was just a weird statement. And
Well,
they all agreed. They looked at each other and said, "Did you see anything?" "No, I didn't. I can't remember."
Well, I think to some degree, you know, first of all, this wasn't a tour bus of
No,
Paris
of course
going
not, of course not.
around.
Yeah.
I mean, they first of all, the windows in Apollo aren't very big.
Yeah.
And in fact, in the original spacecraft, the astronauts had to fight just to get a window
Yeah.
in the Mercury project.
Yeah.
And so I think that, you know, there's so much activity going on with mission status
Yeah.
and scientific experiments. And, you know, overall, it's, you know, it's got to be pretty busy. They didn't schedule these fellows, you know, with time to just sit around and thumb their noses. They were busy, and it could have been that they didn't spend much time in deep space, once away from the planet's influence, looking out there, and unless they had a reason to. So,
well, I do believe if I stood on the moon as a first man, I think I would have looked up. I just think if I could see the Earth.
They did, because remember, there's that picture of Apollo 12 with the UFO hanging right above the astronaut and lighting up his spacesuit.
Yeah.
So both of them saw that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to show that there's moonquakes, which means that there has to be geological activity.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So the moon once again is an active place. So the next thing is clouds, mists, and atmosphere.
Yeah.
And so we will look into those pictures and see what we see. First of all, here's a good picture from lunar orbit. Look at the atmosphere as it extends off the surface.
Yeah.
It literally blurs up the picture.
Yeah.
And
there are not just one picture of this. There are several where it's misty.
We will look at several of them here. Here's one of Earthrise in a sequence in which you can see, as the Earth rise, the light from the Earth starts to illuminate the surface of the moon, which means it starts to interact with the atmosphere between the moon and its surface here. And you can see how the whole area gets lighted and more washed out as well.
Yeah.
And that's due to atmospheric density. And here we go with another one, a picture down of the crater with the obscuration, like we saw in that earlier document from '66 from NASA, where they have reported over time obscure craters, cloud-like mists, what have you. This is the atmospheric component on one of the lunar shots.
Yeah.
Here's a great picture. This always gets people when they look at it. On one orbit, you can see that there's a slight lip of the crater down here on the bottom. And that's pretty much all you can see of this crater. The next time, the orbiter came around to take the next picture of exactly the same area. You can see now that the crater is totally open to view, and this mist area has moved off the crater and north of the crater and covers up the geological features here. There you go, proof positive.
Yeah. You can change by just, if you click on the left side of this picture, you can just go back and forth between those. If you move your cursor to the left,
To the
there
left.
should be one way you can just move left and back and forth. Is there?
No.
No, there's not. No, there's not. No, I can see that. Yeah. So,
but it's easy enough to do ourselves.
yeah, just to go
one
back
more.
and forth. Yeah.
So give it people, once again, only the bottom third of the crater is visible, exactly the same area. And on the next orbit,
It has
that
moved a little
whole
bit.
configuration has moved entirely clear of the core, because the previous picture, you only saw the bottom portion of this crater.
That's
the whole
correct.
thing is bare now.
Yeah.
I mean, this picture alone should give you cause, or anyone cause, to say, hey, things aren't what we thought they were, or
No.
things aren't as we've been told they are.
Exactly. That's a good thing.
All right. Well, and here's the next shot.
That was the one with the flag, I think. Yeah.
Yes, that's the one with the flag, in which the astronaut reached out and held the corner because it started to flap. That's not because it's in a studio. It's
No.
because you have atmospheric pressure gradient movement across the surface on the moon, very low level. And you also have solar wind that moves across the surface.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the reasons why things are much more rational, logical, and factual than the suppositions are.
Yeah.
So here we go into unusual surface activity, mining, construction, bases, and things like this. There's a whole area of the moon that seems to be extremely active. Personally, I believe that that's both our own activities, because we have some bases on the moon, some military bases on the moon, and also extraterrestrial. This picture here, I just wanted to include it because this is an artist's rendition of the southern pole of the moon, in which the ice is formed in the bottom of the crater. And there are areas, as we
it could
saw
actually
earlier,
be a combination of water, actual water, and ice.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And we have, according to the earlier reports from the chronology of the moon, many areas had violet light and blue light and red moving objects and things like this. So I thought this was a good pictorial to give people an idea how things are being configured there.
Definitely.
We saw this picture before in order to have the color differential on the moon and what have you. So we've seen this one already. Here we go. We talked about symbols. Here's an S in the bottom of the crater. So this is highly magnified, but you can see it's in there.
Yeah.
And there are areas that have H's and Z's and things like that. So that it looks like that you know, areas of the moon may be either geographically mapped or partitioned by those who are there, you know, as one group or another. You can see this one's a little bit better on this particular shot, but the symbology is very interesting.
Yeah.
Here's an area that I thought was personally interesting because the geology of the moon fascinates me, and you can see the rills of course, what had to be runoff at one particular time in the moon on the moon's timeline. Some of the craters are terraced around the edges, and just like it, when you look at the mines, the strip mining in the southwest United States, if you fly over these areas in Arizona, and I've done so and taken some pictures as well, this circular strip mining as you go deeper is looks like it's prevalent or active on the moon as well.
Yeah.
Here's a picture of Gassendi crater. Oh, well, let's see. Yeah, Gassendi crater that is taken in the 1930s by the Mount Wilson Observatory. Look at these straight tubular constructions. And now Also elliptical constructions, constructions that meet at a joint point and then go outside through the crater wall and out on the plain. This is Gassendi Major, and this to me looks like, no doubt, the constructions of a space base.
If you zoom into the crater on the right side, just you take your cursor up a bit. Yeah, on the right, up. No, just where you had your cursor, just move it a little bit down. In the middle. Oh, in the middle, you can see there's a crater with an angular structure in the middle. Just go right, a little bit more right. There.
Here?
Can you see that? That's an interesting feature, right?
That also looks like a connectivity point.
Yeah, you can just zoom in more, actually. You can just continue to zoom in on that one. Yeah, and we can really see that that is not a natural shape.
That's not a natural shape.
No,
you have a tube that comes in to a juncture point.
Yeah,
here's another one coming out, two more coming out.
Yeah.
I mean, when you take the close-up look of this crater and these constructions, no one can possibly tell you that is natural configuration.
No.
Not possible.
No.
That's a great picture. And when I have showed this picture on lectures over the last 30 years or so, I always get a gasp of astonishment that comes, and also other crater configurations. This, once again, look here, you have domes and not craters.
Yeah.
So you've got a whole area here that looks like that there's activity within the floor of this crater.
Yeah, an interesting one. Yeah.
A very interesting one to look at.
Yeah. And there are actually also interesting structures on the backside of the moon.
Yes.
Just so you know.
This particular one I just recently found, and I included it simply because it was of interest to me, because these do not look like normal constructions here to me. These tubular configurations here. This looks like some kind of a man-made structures here in the moon. This looks tubular, cigar-shaped to me. So once again, there are so many. When you get these Hasselblad pictures, you have to go over them with a magnifying glass and then sometimes even a microscope in order to look at all the areas that have questionable activity. I mean, my question would be, what's this? I mean, is that something sticking out, or is this something flying out?
Yeah.
Once again, all things that give you cause to question. Here's another one. This looks to me like some ground formations there. This is highly magnetized, and so it's something to look at, but it definitely doesn't look like natural.
It's not a geological surface feature. I don't think so.
It doesn't look like a natural one, no. But once again, when you add it to the sum total of all the other information, then you start thinking, well, this starts to get more and more interesting. Looking here, I always was fascinated by these double craters. You don't see many of them, but you see a crater. Think about what would be the probability of a direct object hit, because there's no skids, there's no trail, so it's a direct hit. And then another one hitting right in the middle of it.
That could also just be the volcanic, what shall we say, the effect of something crashing into the surface and then just bubbling up. So it could just be one impact.
That could be that, absolutely.
It could be that. But it's interesting. It's interesting. There are a few of those. Yeah.
And then you get all these rills that are running around here as well. That's got to be caused by something. And so it's from the observation point.
Yeah.
There are a lot of interesting observations. Here's another one of those.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, this is a different one from a different angle.
Yeah.
But it gives you kind of an idea.
Yeah.
And when you start looking at the moon and you start seeing things, you start seeing that there are domes and not craters, right?
Yeah.
Because the light is coming from the direction of the top of the picture, because this part of the crater is dark and this part of the crater is light. So the light is lighting up this part of the crater. So it shows that it's convex or sunken. But look at some of these other configurations. They're exactly the opposite, right?
Yeah.
So there have been many, as we saw earlier in the observation from the Royal Geographical Astronomical Society, they saw many domes versus craters. I thought this interesting simply because it shows that there are materials being spewed out of the crater.
You just zoom in more, Glenn. You can zoom in much more. Just go. Yeah, that's it. Then people can begin to see what this is.
You can see there's material spewing out of the crater, like somebody is shoveling it and then shooting it out. And then when you look here at the other picture, this one shows it even more clearly, but be careful on the zoom in. But you can see the smaller crater, the material is being spewed out and it cascades and falls into the bigger crater, like you're pouring milk from a glass into the pitcher. So there are areas of the moon that are being mined, and it's very profitable because there's helium-3, there's an abundance of valuable minerals like platinum and gold and everything else, and we could use this 60% gravity environment in order to build spaceships to go to the other regions of the our solar system, and in a much easier way. I found recently this photo. I thought that whatever the heck this was, it certainly was something different, worth looking at. I mean,
it's quite interesting,
It is quite interesting when you think about it, and it would take further research
because it's sticking up above the surface. It is not.
That's right. It's casting the shadow behind it. That's it.
Just look at the small one just in the middle, the one with
right
the
here.
Angle. Yeah, the angle. Can you see the angle?
With the angle on it. Yeah, it looks like one of those Allen wrenches sitting there. So these look, to me at least, like something artificial.
It is.
Yeah, and so this is the lunar.
That's the golf. That's a golf shot, isn't it? Yeah, that's a golf shot.
There it is, and that shows the lunar module on there and what have you, and some of the equipment that was left on the moon. So that's proof positive that we went there and left it there. Here we go. Here's a better picture, I believe, a little clear. This must be an LRO picture because it looks more high definition. Okay, and that shows the lunar module and some of the equipment here as well, and the tracks that the lunar rover left. So, anybody with a reasonable mind and thinking is going to see this and say, "Come on, people! I mean, there it is. There's the proof." And I'll start to think rationally. Terrestrial, meaning Earth-based construction, and extraterrestrial UFO activity. There's a bunch of photos. These are also NASA photos of, and I'm afraid this one isn't going to blow up because it's a different screen, but showing two devices over the lunar surface. And so the next one, I think, is a very good picture. All right, nope, I didn't say that. Let's do this again. So, and there we go as well. And you kind of dome shaped with a saucer shape with a dome on it. Also,
interesting one, yes.
An interesting photo causing some thought.
I think it was from Apollo 11, actually. This one.
It may. I don't have the specifics.
I believe it was. On
that, but this is one of a sequence, and the sequence shows this object moving and then moving closer to the surface and then moving over the crater. So that's showing you as well some activity above the lunar surface. And this is on the back rear side of the moon, or the back side of the moon.
The far side of the moon.
There you go, the far side of the moon. At this particular phase, it was in its dark phase, the 14 days of darkness. And they took a picture of this luminescent object so bright that it lit up the surface for miles around here. This is quite a fantastic photo when you think
Yeah.
about it. That had to be quite an object. And
Yeah.
we ourselves, with our 12.5-inch telescope, witnessed in the crater Aristarchus 3 cigar-shaped UFOs that were 30 miles long. I mean, you start thinking about the possibilities. This is the
Yeah.
Apollo shot I told you about, and I told you about the elliptical saucer that hung over the top, totally illuminating the astronaut. Imagine what the guy who took this picture was thinking. And the astronauts themselves, I have the quotes in my new book. All the astronauts said that they were all accompanied by extraterrestrial vehicles to and from the moon, and oftentimes around Earth orbit. Now, one person said to me, well, that's the sun. And I said, okay, let's see what the sun looks like from lunar orbit. And there it is. It certainly doesn't look elliptical, does it?
No, it does not. And actually, this was from Apollo 12, which had the big problem with their television camera because it did not work more than maybe a couple of minutes. Suddenly it washed out because they moved it towards the sun. That was their claim. And there were no television from the Apollo 12 surface, only still photos.
Yeah.
Quite interesting.
Yeah. Well, they covered themselves in many ways, just like we heard about the auto recording of the astronauts. I believe it was Neil Armstrong who, on audio, was heard to saying, "Look, my God, look at the size of these crafts that are here," and what have you.
Yeah, much of the audio was also where you can hear some kind of director from the Earth saying speak when they had to speak about the technical stuff, or if they were just quiet because they saw something that was unusual, and then he asked them to speak, please talk. And that was quite easy. Yeah, that was quite easy to do.
They also told them switch channels,
to
channel so and so. They wanted to make sure that this got off the air as quickly as possible. I wanted to include this ionization effect because a lot of the astronauts talked about as they travel through space, and especially to the moon, there's this magnetic field or ionization effect that is glowing around the astronauts at certain times. Well, this coincides to some of the UFO reports here on Earth where they talk about the occupants coming out and they slightly glow because of the long-term effects of space travel and the ionization effect in the atmosphere and what have you. So this same phenomena, as we report with extraterrestrial sightings here on this planet, also is a commonality with us as well when we go other places.
There are quite a few photos which has that glow around them with the astronauts as the blue glow.
Yeah, if we really took all the photos we have, we'd be here for days.
Yeah.
Here's a good picture because it shows 2 devices, surface devices, each one leaving a trail. This one has more of a tank-like trail to it, larger trail, and this one has a single column trail behind this. And so, and they're moving along the lunar surface along topography that's going up, not down. So somebody tried to say, well, these were rocks rolling downhill. Well, the problem is that topography is going the other direction.
Yeah,
and as we see,
do you have the next photo? Yeah, you have another photo?
Let's see here. I do have another photo. Here it is.
Where they roll down and up. Yeah.
They come across the plateau, down the crater, across the crater, eventually up the other side and out of the crater. So it's telling you that surface vehicles are being used on the moon. I think to a great extent these are ours because we don't have as many flying objects as they do, because there would be no need for them to go across the surface when you can fly, Exactly. It makes just sense. Here's a couple of lunar photos that were taken by George Adamski in the 1950s at Mount Palomar. He had a 6 and 15-inch telescope. These are of 2 of these crafts in space, each one with their electromagnetic field power on. This one is more fully encompassed with it because it's using a higher power setting. This one you can still see a little bit of the shape of the saucer. And there's also one in this far point, which you don't see in this particular enlargement. I think that that's a great picture when you think about it.
Stunning picture, yeah.
And here's another one that he took of a fleet of these craft moving through space as well. I mean, you know, there's got to be more than a dozen, or not, if not 2 dozen, of these moving through space in formation.
There's over 30, Glenn.
Yeah, I believe you, Renee. I believe you. So when the statement is made by anybody on this planet, like the former Israeli guy, that these UFOs are hiding from us because they don't want to cause a panic, you can see they're not hiding at all.
No.
They've been being seen for hundreds, if not thousands of years recorded.
Yeah.
Here's another Adamski picture of a telescope. This is a cigar-shaped craft. The craft in size inside the field, depending on how high they've turned the power, is about 1/3 the size of this field itself.
Yeah.
So you can imagine the craft like a thermos bottle inside this particular field. That field protects them, like we had the picture of the Earth traveling through space and repelling all the space debris and materials that are in space that can be detrimental to our crafts.
Yeah.
Here's another picture by Adamski, also an excellent picture of this craft trailing the smaller ones. And
yeah, that's a nice one.
And so, and there's a couple more.
Yeah.
These we found in archives not too long ago. So this is showing you of these 3 in motion across the lunar surface. And there's a secondary one where they're in a slightly different configuration, closer together here. So you can definitely see that this is activity on the moon. And this is already, these pictures were taken in 1950.
Yeah.
And then 2 more. This one here that we recently got out of archives as well. Some very good shots.
Yeah.
And then the last one from that sequence.
Super good one.
Yeah. Here's a super good one. I mean, this shows the cigar-shaped mothership, plus all the other craft that are attending it, and you know, over the lunar surface. You know, I mean,
nice.
Yeah. So once again, hard to deny the truth when you see it. Here's Apollo 16. My father found this. We're looking through these pictures with a magnifying glass, and he came across this area here for 2 reasons. These things here don't look like natural configuration, but more importantly, you can see the saucer-shaped craft sitting here with partial of its propulsion system on. And if you go to the next photo, that is an enlargement of that, you get to see, this isn't cooperating, here we go. You get to see not only what these unusual things are here, more looking more unusual, but also the craft inside this depression.
You can zoom in, Glenn, a little bit.
Yes,
on that,
here we go.
Because there are several objects in this picture. Up on the crater rims, there are 2 more large ones. Yeah. This one and the one below, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, those below.
Here,
and that's one. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so this area looks to me like a base.
Yeah.
This looks to me like an extraterrestrial base in this particular ridge area that's there.
Yeah.
And to give you an example, here's a picture. This was taken in Scotland, the Coniston photos, but it showed the magnetic field around the saucer, and then the orthographic projections that came up with the dimensions of 33 feet.
Yeah.
And so it looks exactly like the one there on the moon.
Yeah.
And so, and for those of all who think that these are Nazi craft, we have done a YouTube video in this whole library of stuff that dispels the Nazi false accusation
Yeah.
about them being the substitute for extraterrestrial craft, because even though the Nazis tried to duplicate it and tried to build stuff, they were not successful to the
No.
extent of electromagnetic energy and free gravity device. This is interesting because this is above the surface, the same kind of lenticular device above the crater. I included this.
Taken from it's a still frame from an Apollo 16 video.
Okay.
Yeah.
This one we found interesting because we found a cavity, kind of like a crater, but of course not round. And there's something here hanging over the edge, because you can see it obscuring the edge and also casting a bit of a shadow. So that means that it's hanging over either, a cloud, a bridge, a device, or something. It's definitely not a normal configuration.
No, it is not. That's a construction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's a great picture of the astronaut, and then up here, the blue lit UFO.
Several times seen in the moon surface pictures.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Many
Different
times.
colors, different, always in a lenticular or saucer or cigar-shaped configuration. That's the standard configuration.
Yeah.
And once again, for people who haven't heard any of the earlier programs that are in this YouTube library, anything that's rectangular, cubes, acorn, anything with protrusions in the hull, fins, landing gear, pods, any of those things, those are devices that are constructed under our own experimental process. Nothing extraterrestrial, because in order to use electromagnetic propulsion and to be able to travel many times the speed of light, you cannot have strange configurations which cause such an amount of disturbance running along the surface of the craft. That actually would tear it apart.
Yeah, it has to be smooth. Everything has to be smooth.
Has to be smooth. Absolutely. Here's a shot that we found interesting, simply because of this cigar shaped here, and we do have a blow up of it, so that hopefully, here we go, that looks a little bit better, and you can see that it is a cigar shaped object that's in orbit around the moon.
Yeah, also from Apollo.
Yes, also from Apollo.
Yeah, there are a lot of strange things in the sky in Apollo photos.
And I also always want to give credit to our late president. President Kennedy was the one who had the vision and the courage to know that space, the exploration of space, the interaction with the space people and our space visitors was vital to the continuation of our civilization. Yeah. And so
he saw that it was our future, but unfortunately,
it was designed to replace the military-industrial complex because the space program produced 4 to 1 on its return. So for every dollar spent, $3 more or $4 was gained in technology, scientific development, employment, advancements of the sciences, and that was supposed to move us away from the destructive nature upon which we have currently now built our economies, and why the world sits once again on the nuclear precipice, because we do not have anybody with his vision and leadership and his mentality. What we have now is a joke.
Yeah. Our economies are constructed around destruction, unfortunately.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just to give people my latest book here, just to look at it, and it's available, as you can see, on eBay and blurb.com, both in soft and hard covers. They set the price, they do the printing, not me. So if you have any complaints, you'll have to call their complaint department, not mine.
When you have the book in your hand, there's nothing to complain about other than be astounded. That's it. It's a must read.
This book was designed to give people truth,
Yeah.
not to cause more mayhem, not to cause more mystery and
No.
more confusion. But I have found by its reception, especially within the UFO community, they don't like it. And they don't want to touch it and talk about it because they then can't perpetuate every day or every week the type of programming they are. And I think we deserve better than that.
Yeah.
And I am right now negotiating with 4 different countries' languages to make it available as much as possible across the planet. And I hope to be successful with those negotiations and those translations into those other languages.
Yeah.
So there's
good idea.
And then for those who want to scan the code, here's our QR code, and that will take you directly to the Adamski website, in which we have a plethora of information, and it also provides facts and true facts, verifiable facts, against so many of the false accusations that were made against George Adamski and his photographs. So because the laboratories and the technical tests, the photographic analysis all prove that what he took was authentic. And anybody who wants to debate that, I'm willing to do that anytime or place.
Yeah.
So Renee, this I hope
This
is a good ending to our program here. I'm trying to get.
Can you stop sharing?
I'm trying to. Every time I touch the button, it moves. So it doesn't stop. All right, stop share. There we go.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
it. Now
That's
we can
it.
see you in
as usual. It's not the machine; it's the operator.
Yeah,
So,
that's a normal culprit, of course. Yeah, it is.
yeah.
Always, Glenn. This was very, very nice. I think we came around the subject of the moon in nauseating almost detail, but it's important to get around the whole subject. I think it's important to take everything inside this subject, because it's not just the surface of the moon or what's above the moon, how the moon looks. It's also the conditions on the moon, and they are very important. And they are also important that what the conditions are in the solar system, right? The solar wind,
yeah.
magnetic field, whatever. Everything is important.
We were going to add a section on Venus and Mars, but we didn't want to be here all night, so we'll save that for another time.
I think we can maybe find another time for that, but there are more to talk about, definitely. The moon is an important thing. It's it's our closest neighbor, and it's very important, actually. And there's still debate on how it was created, actually, how it came about, coming that close. And there's some debate about that. And I think they are getting revised again after the Chinese sample return of the far side of the moon. It's coming some interesting things, but I think they have to revise the creation theory again about the moon. It will have to come, I think. It was not just a collision of 2 bodies. It was something else, maybe.
Yeah. It will eventually be creaked open like an old book, very tiny and carefully, because they don't want to admit too much too soon. But think about the other planets. Think about Jupiter and Mars and these other planets that have, 12, 2 dozen moons.
Yeah.
It's really incredible. And then look at Mars, where it has 2 moons that orbit counter to all the other moons in the solar system.
Yeah.
And some of the scientists, included particularly the Russians, saying these moons are not natural configurations. They look like asteroids that have been positioned from the asteroid belt around Mars.
Yeah.
And that's also discussed in my book as well, because there are some scientists have theorized that they are hollow, and they're being used as bases for the inhabitants of Mars.
Yeah, perhaps they were put in that orbit which they are inhabiting at the moment. I think they look particularly strange, those 2 moons.
They do. So as with many other theories, that's one more, and it's always worth to take a look at things, because that way we're not surprised whenever the truth comes out and say, oh well, we had that already in mind to begin with.
Yeah. Definitely, quite right, Glenn. Glenn, I want to thank you for this moon program talk, and that's about it. Thank you very
Very
much.
good. Thank you
you.
very much, Renee. Till
Yeah.
next time.